Earlier this month, I was able to make it out to Six Flags Over Texas near Dallas, Texas for my first ever visit. I walked away a pretty big fan of the place, and absolutely, I would love to return one day when it's less busy. Speaking of crowds, I went during the last day of spring break in Texas, meaning it was very crowded with most wait times averaging at about 90 minutes. To manage, me and my brother decided to purchase a Flash Pass wristband, which helped considerably in racking up the park's coaster credits. Now unfortunately, there were still 3 existing coasters here that I did not get to experience. The first and the most obvious is Aquaman Power Wave, which is the new for 2022 mock Power Splash coaster. Out of the 2 operational coasters I missed, one of them was Wile E. Coyote's Grand Canyon Blaster, which is the Chance Rides Jr. coaster. Lastly, and by far the one that I really should have gotten on, was Batman the Ride, which is a clone of many other Batman clones you can find at other Six Flags parks. That said, this is said to be one of the worst, if not the worst Batman clone out there, so I'm not too pressed about it. If we're judging by my experience on other Batman clones, it would have probably placed it around 4 or 5 on this list. Because I've been on many others, I don't feel too guilty about missing it when the wait time was listed at an hour and a half for the entire day. But other than these 3 rides, I was able to get on all 11 other roller coasters that this wonderful Six Flags park had to offer. Today, I will be ranking them all up from my least favorite to my most favorite, and of course, my own personal opinion. If you don't agree, there's no need to worry. I would love to hear about your rankings of the coasters here down in the comment section below. One more thing I should mention, we are well on the way to 5,000 subscribers at this point, so if you could help make that a reality, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you all for your support, and without further ado, let's dive right into my top 11 roller coasters at Six Flags Over Texas. Number 11, Mini Mine Train. A clear worst coaster that I rode while at Six Flags Over Texas was this one right here, but saying that is a bit deceiving because it wasn't actually a bad ride. Matter of fact, it was a decent kids ride. Being one of the few mini aero mine trains in existence, this ride was pretty enjoyable but janky at the same time. Like I said though, it's meant for younger kids, so I can't put it any higher than the bottom spot. Number 10, Runaway Mine Train. Located directly across from Mini Mine Train, the adult version is actually a fantastic aero mine train coaster. I almost feel kind of bad putting it at the number 10 spot because this ride checked off nearly every box for a mine train. It kept a good pace throughout the layout, it was a very long ride, it had some tunnels and theming, and a total of 3 lift hills. I waited quite a while to get on this coaster, but I'm sure glad I got on it because it's an old classic credit that was a whole lot of fun. Number 9, Pandemonium. This Gerstlauer spinning coaster is equally as fun as the nearly identical iterations at the other Six Flags parks. This was my second Pandemonium after the one at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas, and it was exactly how I remembered it. Comfortably dizzying spinning with a fun layout that even has a couple moments of floater airtime. I should stress that it was a tough call between this and Runaway Mine Train since this is a much less original ride, but still it is a fun coaster and it's a great choice for families. Number 8, Runaway Mountain. Speaking of family coasters, this one was very reminiscent of Skull Mountain at Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey. So much so actually that I sometimes refer to it as Skull Mountain 2.0 as a joke because it really is that similar. Unlike my experience with the New Jersey version, I was really able to appreciate the sheer power of that one twisted drop people like to rave about. I also thought this one had more character with the music in the background, even if it was really cheesy. Lastly, this coaster held its speed fairly well for a family ride. You'd be surprised at its pacing, to be honest. So as a wrap up, it's a fun ride, and make sure to ride it early in the day since it tends to get rather long lines. Number 7, La Vibora. Another coaster that gets ridiculously long lines is this extremely rare intimate bobsled coaster, which was my first from the manufacturer. I found this ride to be a ton of fun with its side-to-side transitions and even some abrupt airtime, much to my surprise. The only thing I didn't really love were the numerous brake runs that really screwed up the pacing, but I do recognize that all bobsled coasters are like that. Otherwise, I thought it was a super unique, fun ride, and I really couldn't be happier to have it in my credit count. Number 6, Judge Royce Scream. This old school wooden coaster was one that really caught me by surprise. Not only did it run very smoothly, but it had decent pacing, some solid airtime moments, and a classic out and back layout. I also found it interesting that it was secluded from the rest of the park, as you have to walk under a road to get to it, and thus it's rather hard to find if you aren't paying attention. But with it technically being outside the park, the environment around it is quite nice, with a lake and some greenery surrounding the attraction. So I was impressed. I thought it was a pretty fun wood coaster, and I'd definitely recommend giving it a ride. Number 5, Joker. A much less unique coaster than the last few spots, I decided to put this park's free spin in the top 5 because it ran really aggressive. Matter of fact, I'd say it rivaled the one at Six Flags Great Adventure for my favorite free spin. This thing may be short, but it throws you around like a rag doll and it shows no mercy until you hit the final brakes. More so than most coasters, you don't have a second to catch your breath, and I guess that's what I like so much about this ride. Its sheer aggression and out of control nature made this quite the memorable ride for me despite the hour-long line I waited for it. Number 4, Titan. I've said time and time again that I couldn't be less of a fan of Goliath at Six Flags Magic Mountain, but I'm happy to say that I'd be now willing to give that a second chance. I say this because Titan is a near clone of that ride, and it was a whole lot better than I remembered Goliath being. Granted, it's still not my favorite thing in the world, like I think it's severely lacking in airtime, but it had a lot of good positive G-force. Starting with the speed, I didn't even ride this in the front, but I felt all of that wind in my face up until that mid-course brake run. While we're on the topic of the first half, what separates this ride the most from Goliath is that additional double helix just before the aforementioned mid-course brake run. That's easily one of the highlights of the ride for me, but I'd say the most intense element on the ride was the final double helix, which will cause you to gray out literally every ride. Again, it's definitely lacking in airtime, but I suppose I can't hate too much on it because the forces were really quite solid. Number 3, Shockwave. Prior to riding, I had heard rave reviews of this coaster, especially as of recent. So you may be wondering, did it live up to the hype? I only got one ride, but I'd honestly say no. I say that because I'm starting to see an increase in people who will take this ride as their number 1 coaster in the park. That I don't understand, but it's still a great ride, and I would say it's my favorite Schwarzkopf at the moment. Going back to why I find this coaster slightly overrated is because I do think there are some dead spots in between the highlight elements. By no stretch would I call this a relentless ride, but to touch on the highlights a bit, the double loops were extremely intense. Following this, and the reason everyone loves this ride are for the crazy pops of ejector airtime. These are fantastic moments and really help this ride stand out. Another thing I liked was how you traverse the first few elements alongside the freeway, so as you're circling through the 2 loops, you are sort of racing the cars beside you, which is really a cool touch. Shockwave was undeniably a fun coaster, and one that I hope the park keeps around for years to come, but I just don't think it's as good as some make it out to be. Number 2, New Texas Giant. While I know many of you are probably a bit surprised to see that I didn't put Texas Giant at the number 1 spot, I will say that it was very close and that it's a big step up from Shockwave in my opinion. Look, I hate calling this ride my least favorite RMC, even if it couldn't be more true. As of right now, I've been on Steel Vengeance, Twisted Colossus, Twisted Timbers, Iron Rattler, and Wonder Woman, so obviously it makes sense, but I still think it's quite deceiving to call it that. I found this coaster to be excellent regardless, and the fact that it was RMC's first go at a roller coaster is very impressive. While it certainly felt tamer than the other RMCs, Texas Giant did do many things well, such as length, airtime, length, and did I mention length? I don't know what it is, but this thing felt like it was going on forever, and I'd even argue to the extent of Steel Vengeance. This is an awesome standout ride for this park, and I completely understand why it's most people's favorite coaster here, but for me, I walked away thinking something a little bit different. Number 1, Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast. Going in, this was definitely one of the coasters I was most looking forward to riding, but I don't think I could have braced myself for the experience that was to come. After a week of gathering my thoughts, I can say with full confidence that this ride beats out Full Throttle and my favorite Premier Rides roller coaster. And honestly, this ride is so good that I'm going to break down the individual elements for you guys, starting with that backwards launch out of the station. This felt very reminiscent of Superman Escape from Krypton's backwards launch at Six Flags Magic Mountain, only this one appeared to blast you out of the tunnel at a faster speed. Following this, one of the weirdest elements I felt on any coaster, the inverting top hat, provides a fantastic mix of hang time, airtime, and laterals. Next is the overbank turn, which taken backwards is the weakest moment on the ride, but it's still solid. Then the most bizarre moment of the ride, and one of the most bizarre elements on any coaster, which is that 200 plus foot vertical spike with a set of booster LIMs to propel you even higher. I swear, it feels like you're levitating for a second thanks to that awesome floater airtime you get here, and as you look out and take in the view, you just rocket down that hypersized drop and into the course forwards this time. While I do think the inverting top hat is a bit weaker in this direction, the overbank turn sure as heck isn't. Mr. Freeze may not be the longest thing in the world, but it packs in so many amazing and unique elements both forwards and backwards. I couldn't recommend this ride more, as well as the other coasters in the park. Six Flags Over Texas has a seriously great lineup, and I know I'll be back for some re-rides someday in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you can consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel as we begin approaching 5,000 subscribers. Also, I'd love to hear down in the comments how you'd rank the coasters at Six Flags Over Texas. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I will see you all very soon. Bye guys.